Fukushima situation. And
let me explain something about Japan and about Fukushima. And this is an interesting thing, and I'm going to deal with the black forest around the exclusion zone. What is the largest open-air wildlife preserve now of wildlife in Eurasia? It's the zone of alienation around the Chernobyl plant. They thought all the animals, all the little bunnies, all the deer, and all the moose would be dead. Guess what? What happened is it excluded and killed off all the animals that didn't have enough enzymes to protect their DNA from being able to reproduce, and the ones that survived became super animals. So in other words, even if after a generation or so it kills off a lot of people will emerge. There's a town in Iran where the natural background radiation is higher than Fukushima and has been for many centuries. And guess what? People go about their business like it's nothing. So I have to tell people that enzyme induction, natural selection of people that don't have the enzymes, they die, and induction through what's called hormesis. I don't think it's inevitable that everybody's going to be wiped out. In fact, the greatest now nature preserve in Eurasia is, guess what, the zone of alienation or the zone of exclusion around Chernobyl. Isn't that interesting? So I think people, what they should understand is that the Japanese are by no means defeated, and in fact the amount of nuclear materials and their advanced rocket systems they have for delivering satellites, the Japanese are absolutely no slouches. Welcome back, and now we have joining us Chris Harris. Chris, to follow up to the report yesterday, and of course that's your radio name, you're one of the nuclear safety experts that advises safety nuclear plants across America. And we have Japan, and we've predicted this now for almost 2 years, that they're going to be massively burping or releasing radiation, or it's just going to leak out because the groundwater is getting contaminated, then leaking out to the ocean, or vaporizing into the air or burping into the air through steam jets that can be miles away from the site of the Fukushima Daiichi plant. There's also a purposeful release of radiation from storage tanks because they want to release the, quote, less radioactive water. What I've heard is the least radioactive water is at least 6 times over limit for tritium, strontium, and other heavy radioisotopes. That the Japanese are committing an illegal and international crime by doing this. They should be offloading it to double-hulled supertankers and then converting it to solid waste, if necessary, at another facility. But instead of that, the Japanese are thinking they're going to get away with this, by the way, TEPCO and General Electric, which is tied directly to General Electric International. So what's really happening, and how bad is this going to get in terms of poisoning the Pacific Ocean? And, of course, we're in the tailpipe of Fukushima. What's it going to do to us and to our food supplies and the gradual bioaccumulation of these radioisotopes over the next decades?
Well, to date, that's been a year and 10 or 11 months, 10 months after the accident. We've discussed that this is going to be a major contamination control issue, and many steps need to be taken to stop this endless fountain of contamination that's going to be basically coming out of Fukushima for decades to come.
But they never, any of the suggestions we made, they never did. They didn't put up a seawall with a containment. They haven't used double-hulled ships to pump out the less radioactive water to filtration. And we already have the technology to convert it to solid waste. They never built a corium catcher. They never blocked any regular groundwater in the local area getting into the contaminated area. They've never actually built a flexible containment tent over it with fiber made from Kevlar and spider silk, which can't be a solid container, like they're building solid containment shells over the top of these, because it's a hydrovolcanic explosion. It's going to blow these little shells off like nothing. There's no convincing proof that they've actually stopped venting off radioisotopes, and I'm sure in the middle of the night they are sneakingly releasing more, but we expect to see hydrovolcanic venting going many kilometers away from the site. This area is much more unruly than the sarcophagus over Chernobyl, which needs to be rebuilt now because it's breaking down. And this is going to require vigilance for tens of thousands, if not millions of years. They don't have any application of technologies that I'm sure Tesla talked about, which is accelerated half-life degradation of radioisotopes that he talked about with Marie Curie in some of his letters. We don't have any idea that we've learned lessons from Fukushima about changing our technology here in America from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Steam generation, the leaking from the torus, the idea that there's new ways of criticality occurring, which we have discovered from observation and from what's called an intellectual autopsy of what happened there. Basically, I see a devastating desert of informational and intellectual and nuclear safety stupidity at unprecedented galactic levels.
Well, I guess what some of the high points are that, I was really concerned about this just from the onset because I knew that this is a really monumental task, and some of the ideas that we come up that we've been talking about are slowly being planned and implemented, but on a glacier level,
glacial. That's a really good term, glacial. But glacial doesn't work when your women are unwise to have a pregnancy. When they're told, don't worry, submit your gametes to the new agency for human reproduction in Japan, which will determine by polar body exclusion that your fetus and your embryo is no longer genetically altered by Fukushima Daiichi. They'll be grown in a radiation-proof building and will have a birth ceremony after the artificial uterus delivers your healthy Japanese child. Because maybe genetically upgraded to have new traits and new abilities that didn't exist previously in your germline. People say, oh no, Dr. Deagle, they can't do that. I say, well, I can't see the logic in the Japanese people succumbing to this and putting up with the crap of circulating radioisotope material to be burned in incinerators all across Japan. I can't see the logic in people just sitting there like, a child sitting in the middle of a freeway with high-speed traffic heading toward it. It doesn't make sense. It's a form of genetic, racial omnicide. It's craziness that they would put up with this.
These are the lessons that we need to learn from this, because this is a black eye on everything. It's a big industrial accident, and it's a black eye on all of our ability to stay healthy. Right now, there's 220.
But you got to think of an ulterior motive, though. See, we want to presume it's just stupidity. I say there's an equation I call stupidity. When you see something, here's a corollary. When you see something that exceeds the capacity of your ability to assume stupidity of the people involved, you always have to factor in evil.
Well, yeah, I guess there'd be some. Well, certainly greed would be.
Well, one form of evil, which is backwards by live. You actually spell live backwards. It's evil.
Well, that's true. But they're still creating 40 tons a day of waste, and that is liquid waste. And I'm not going to talk about the airborne anymore. I mean, unless something else happens there. But right now, the big kicker is how much liquid rad waste is being lost to the sea and uncontrolled. And it's certainly, that goes against anybody who's a nuclear engineer or anybody out of these plants. The loss of that kind of containment rubs us definitely the wrong way. It's repugnant. And so 40 tons a day, they only have 220,000 tons sitting there. They're running out of room. Now, what they are doing is we've already been through the drawings and all. You posted them on your website that I sent you, and we went in great detail about what the SARI system was and how it did the cleanup. And it's also generating not just cleaner water, but when you do that, whenever you clean one thing, you've got to take something out of it, and you make something else dirty. Well, you're making filters dirty, and you're storing very highly radioactive sludge. And see, that's a concern too. What do you do with this sludge after a period of time? Does it just sit there? What do you do with it? It becomes, and it's going to leak because none of the SARI system, or most of the SARI system, is not intended to be. It's been over there since August of 2011. It's been subjected to the weather, snow. So it's been subjected to 2 typhoons that I know of. Other earthquakes. The stuff is leaking. And
well, one thing that we're not talking about, you did before, you were the first to bring it up, was subsidence. So we not only have building degradation, we have them building, containments around it. They're trying to prevent the buildings from leaning over. But we've got the substructure of the buildings subsiding because of millions of tons of water, and subsidence where the structural integrity of the framework that supports the buildings is going away.
I'm sorry. To those ends, they did start laying down the foundation for the Unit 4 structural support building, i.e., also the broken fuel vacuuming system. We're talking. How long?
Well, that's around the building. No, I'm talking about the actual building itself. I don't know how they can build a new framework for the structure under the building. They might build a frame around it that appears on a new frame or substructure or footings. But there's no evidence whatsoever they got control of the actual structural building. And when these things bend, like the fuel rod assembly bundles and these cooling pools, they can't be withdrawn even by a crane because they're bent. The problem is that some of them have undergone degradation, they've undergone neutron annealing, they've undergone twisting and because of subsidence, and they've also had explosions, hydrogen explosions, and we think there's critical explosions, which are basically criticality that can be sub-threshold for full-blown explosion, but they're not normal anymore. And of course, they don't want to own up to anything. They'll tell, well, we took the new bundles that look pretty good, and of course, no lessons learned here in America. They want to restart the Sun and No Freight plant here in Southern California. They're not going to shut down Diablo Canyon. Now they want to license all these plants in Mexico where there's no regulations whatsoever and sell power to America right along the fault line. And we'll hear Alexander's response to that when we come back. Welcome back, and we have Ann Morrison back. And we want to hear also Alexander's report on this. I don't think, as Chris says, that Mexico is mature enough as a society. It's so darn corrupt to be able to manage nuclear plants without having major problems. And you have some major news as well. You sent me an email here. I can't believe it. The FDA news release about the flu block vaccine that's made with a trivalent vaccine made with insect virus, baculovirus expression, and recombinant DNA. So it's a part human, part insect virus. That's great. A chimera of insect virus and human virus. That's nuts. The more you see things, you think you can't reach the top or the bottom of the well of evil, and I always get these feelings of like, oh my God, I'm overwhelmed again. You shake your head and you say you can't get worse, and you turn around and guess what? It's worse.
This just knocked me off my feet when I read it. Yeah, they're using a flu block, and they're offering it to people, and it's made out of an insect virus, which is, we talk about cross-species contamination. Well, this isn't cross-species. This is cross-phylum.
Right, cross-phyla. Now, tell us about the other side of the news. We have a bunch of space weather issues that are going to come up real quickly here.
Really quickly, in 2 weeks, the DA-14 asteroid will be passing by the Earth inside the geosynchronous Earth-orbiting satellites. And
right, so in other words, we'll call this a Dr. D comet because it's going to be 197 meters across. It's going to cross on my birthday, which is the 15th of February, 2 weeks from today. And this is scary because they would stop releasing data as how close it could be. And remember, it's going to come with a debris field, too. Then we have a really big one that's going to cross sometime this year. We're going to cross through part of the tail of it. This something like S2012 DA, whatever, comet that's 26 miles across. That's going to cross with the tail of it over a month long, crossing the tail near October 3rd Mars. And it's going to go really close to the sun, apparently, so there could be some effects there, either plasma effects, according to Dr. McCanney, that can cause a major coronal mass ejection, or the release of a breakup of this comet into a lot of comet pieces. So God knows what's going to happen with that.
Yeah, we might have two suns in the sky at the end of the year.
Right. It's going to be actually 15 times brighter than the moon, which is pretty dang bright.
Then in the middle of March, we're going to have another comet. It's called C-2011L4, and it's going to cross the orbit of Mercury. Now, if you think about the solar system, we have the solar disk, the sun, and then the first planet is Mercury. So it's going to be inside the Mercury orbit. And this will be has never been to the inner solar system before. It's falling from the Oort cloud. So it's never been altered by the warmth of the sun. And almost anything could happen, ranging from a bakeout to a spectacular disruption. So
now, the fact is these objects are coming in from the Oort cloud to the inner area. This is an example of what Dr. Muller talked about, the 26 million year cycle. He calls a nemesis cycle, where there's a dwarf star that you don't see because it's so cold relative to deep space. You can't see it except with Chandra X-ray telescope, the stereo telescopes, or IRAS, the infrared telescope. And these objects are about maybe a tenth the size of the sun, but they're have a magnetic field. If it's a red dwarf star, that's roughly 200 to 2,000 times stronger magnetic field than the actual sun. And so the plasma effects of this object coming into our inner solar system could be monumental and cataclysmic.
Exactly.
One of the things that I keep on having, and I keep telling people this, is I watched a program called Sunstorm the other night, and I would say, looking at different crises that are likely to happen, it's likely this year or next we're going to have a bank holiday. Probably not longer than 5 or 10 days, but it's going to be a devaluation of the dollar. It's very likely, though, we're going to have a coronal mass ejection. Sometime in the next few years, it'll be similar to the Carrington event, maybe slightly more or slightly less, but it's going to cause damage to a number of transformers in the power grid. If we have an event that happens because we have a near-Earth object coming in the next number of decades, and I don't know when it'll be, but we know that the next few years is particularly dangerous for CME activity, but a near-Earth object can produce a plasma effect of a coronal mass ejection or a major superstorm. The Earth has had these type of events before. In fact, it was thought to be a major superstorm that happened on the Sun in the 8th century that really hit Earth. And, of course, the population was a lot less then. We didn't have high technology, so we wouldn't know. The Carrington event, if it happened today, would wipe out our civilization. Just the same as the Carrington event. It would just like, boom, bye-bye, no more iPads, no more cell phones, no more power grid, no more high-speed trains, no more communications, no more credit cards, no more gas stations, no more grocery delivery to the grocery stores. We wouldn't go back to the Stone Age, as I said, because the Stone Age would be like going to the Sandals Resort. This would not be pleasant.
You know, just about the time that my telephone connection was messed up, we had a 6.7 earthquake. Just northeast of Australia.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Now, I think when we see objects like these comets coming in, I have to be suspicious that the government or agencies such as the Vatican will have these special type of, we call near-Earth space object telescopes, like the one, the telescopes in Ecuador, that they are specifically looking for near-Earth space objects that have plasma effects, according to Dr. McKenney, that can cause superstorms on the Sun. Because I think that what I worry about most, if you want to call it the number one thing that I'm worried about most in terms of the next, say, 10 years, 20 years, is a kill shot. We're talking about a major superstorm on the Sun that's going to devastate our civilization. That's number one by a very large margin. Number two would be a major plague, most likely a super flu like this flu that happens to upgrade, or future flu, H5N1, H1N1. And the third, and believe it or not, way down the list would be a nuclear war. I don't think that the regular powers that be are stupid enough to start a nuclear war, although little sawed-off powers might try something. We can probably defend against that. I would say the release of a bioweapon, if we attack asymmetric nations like Iran, is much more likely than a nuclear war. And climate shift, our ice age, if we start going to a significant cooling period in the next 10 to 20 years, major population shifts will cause a lot of problems. And we're likely to see that happen as after 2014 it'll become very evident there's no such thing as global warming. What we're heading into is a cooling period called a Maunder-type cooling period, or an ice age.
Okay, I do want to mention really quickly the green comet Lemon. It will be coming in about the orbit of Venus, which is the second planet out from the Sun. And it has a period of about 11,000 years. It's currently being seen in the southern hemisphere, and in late March it will be approaching the Sun, and we'll get our first good look at the comet in early April. And it's until then it'll only be seen in the southern hemisphere. Now this is 11,000 years, and isn't that one of your time periods?
Yeah, there's a cycle called a Maunder cycle. Every 360 years, it's an ice age cooling cycle. There's 11,000 year cycle for mild, we call moderate ice age cycles. Then there's 105,000 year Milankovitch cycle related to the orbital stretch of the planet around the Sun, whether it's oval or spherical. When it's spherical, it tends to cool off, which is we're heading toward now. So we're at the convergence of all those cycles. We're also at the convergence of the Dr. Mueller cycle of 26 million year cycle of the approach of a Nemesis star, which we, by the way, if they knew it, they wouldn't tell us. We're passing through the galactic plane that happens every 62 million years. We're also in that cycle. So all these cycles, 360-year cycle, 11,000, 105,000-year cycle, 26 million-year cycle, and the 62 million-year cycle we pass through the galactic plane and arm of our galaxy, all are happening relatively now. By now, I mean in the next number of 20, 30 years. What that means is we're in a period of higher danger of nearer space objects. The research I pulled up is that we have a 30 times higher risk of an impact from an asteroid or comet. Which means on an average day before this, 20 years ago, chances of 1 in 22,000 of a comet causing a impact that would knock out a place the size of Luxembourg, that is now increased 30 times. We are much more likely in the next 2 years to have major superstorms. It's thought that the next 2 years will be the most active sun activity in 400 years since they started doing solar mapping with Galileo. So I think we're likely to see some major. What I'm most concerned about is a very fragile power grid that they haven't hardened, civilization dependent on electronics, including electronic currency and ghost money, and even the civil defense systems that could trigger or miscommunicate and think we're having an incoming nuclear weapon system and trigger launch on command sequence to start a nuclear war. So I'd say my most serious concern is superstorms on the sun caused by nearer space objects and the lack of preparation of our society. What do you think?
I think you're right, and I think we're going to see a lot of things on the sun that we need to know about and be prepared for.
And of course that can cause strobing of ultraviolet light that can burn our crops. It can cause major plasma storms that can blow our power grid and so on, and change human behavior. And also this rings the earth like a bell that can trigger superquakes and supervolcano activity as well. All of it tied together with these converging cycles. So we don't tell you what to believe, but research it yourself, pray on it, take action. Don't just pretend that being a prepper is stupid. It's not. Thank you, Alexander Bachman. Thank you, Ann Morrison, our scientist. And thank you, Chris Harris, our nuclear safety expert. Back again next week, Monday.